President Trump pushes the Ukraine responsibility onto Europe.
The 2-week-long aerial conflict between Israel and Iran has diverted much of the world's attention away from the war in Ukraine. At the NATO Summit in The Hague, Netherlands, President Trump made it clear that he now views funding Ukraine as Europe's responsibility. As for himself, he appears to have lost patience with pushing forward the peace process. Although Russia and Ukraine continue to exchange prisoners of war, the peace talks that began in Istanbul in early June have shown no further progress. However, discussions are reportedly underway for a possible third round of negotiations as early as next week. Ahead of that, the NATO Summit in The Hague was expected to reaffirm that Ukraine remains a top US priority, but that did not happen. Instead, the standout goal of the summit seemed to be solidifying European allies' commitment to spending 5% of GDP on defense, Trump's top priority since taking office. That goal was achieved. With the exception of Spain, all other NATO members have pledged to meet the target. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte delivered a message full of praise to President Trump, stating, "Dear President Donald Trump, you have brought us to a truly pivotal moment for America, Europe, and the world. You have accomplished what no US president has in decades." Still, it's hard to ignore the sense that Ukraine is no longer at the top of Trump's agenda, and by extension, no longer NATO's top focus either. The NATO Summit communiqué in Washington in 2024 totaled over 5,300 words and was filled with carefully crafted diplomatic language. In contrast, the 2025 Hague Declaration was just 425 words long and focused almost entirely on defense spending. While the Washington communiqué once declared, "We will continue to support Ukraine on its irreversible path toward full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership," the Hague Declaration made no mention of this. Some commentators see this as a sign that NATO is softening its stance on Ukraine. Adding to the concern, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's remark that the US would not support additional sanctions on Russia at this time sparked discontent among European political circles. The declaration simply stated, "Allies reaffirm their long-standing sovereign commitment to supporting Ukraine, whose security contributes to our collective security, and to that end will include direct contributions to Ukraine's defense and its defense industry as part of national defense spending." This statement reveals two key points. First, the emphasis on the word sovereign suggests that some nations may choose to support Ukraine, while others may not, clearly reflecting President Trump's stance that funding the Ukraine conflict is a European responsibility, not an American one. Second, and more directly, contributions to Ukraine can be counted toward the 5% defense spending target, something the United Kingdom has already begun applying. During his meeting with Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reportedly requested additional Patriot missile systems. While Trump made no commitments, it seems clear that if such a deal happens, it will likely be paid for with European, not American, funds. For his part, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte appears to be doing everything he can to keep Europe's support train for Ukraine running. Ahead of the summit, he mentioned an additional $35 billion aid commitment for Ukraine this year, but offered no further details. However, more than half of the $24 billion pledged in April came from Germany and is set to be disbursed over 4 years. In reality, NATO has so far mobilized only up to $22 billion for 2025, a figure far below Ukraine's enormous financial needs. What was notably absent at The Hague was momentum toward ending the war in Ukraine. With the Hague Declaration no longer clearly condemning Russia, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer continued to urge allies to once again pressure President Putin to return to the negotiating table for an unconditional ceasefire. Starmer reiterated that even if the US stops providing further support and Ukraine continues to struggle on the battlefield while Europe scrambles to fill the gap, Russia may eventually offer unconditional concessions from a position of strength. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has not given up on the goal of bringing Ukraine into NATO, a stance that makes any peace agreement or even a sustainable ceasefire with Russia virtually impossible.